Do. Where are you? Come on. There it is.
And you ain't black.
Wow, I'm not sure why that just played twice, but what's going on, guys? Wait a second. Where is my audience? There it is. There it is. Oh, that's what it is. 1 second. There we go. Sorry, I had the YouTube playing in the background. My bad. Thank you guys for all coming today. Yes, this is going to be a really good broadcast tonight. I have on with me Vocab Malone. Thank you, sir, for joining. I appreciate your time. You can be anywhere and doing anything, but you decided to come on and impart the wisdom. All right, I appreciate it, man. I can give an intro about you, but I think it'd probably be a little bit more, a little bit better if you just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Vocab. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, originally from Ohio, hence the Cincinnati Reds hat. I do stuff online like a lot of apologists these days. I am a Christian apologist. Put out a couple self-published books. The most recent ones, Street Level Apologetics, Passion for the City, Clarity for the People, Contextualize Apologetics, focusing on how to use apologetics and evangelism in a city context. Practical and hopefully inspiring. And then a little primer on the Hebrew Israelites. It's on Hebrew Israelism, and it's just basically, despite the title, don't let that fool you, it's really just a hook. It's really just a book to teach you the basics of what some of these guys believe and how to deal with it. And I'm on YouTube and stuff like that, and I do some stuff out in the street, sometimes more traditional evangelism, but sometimes polemics, where I'll go and essentially challenge Hebrew Israelites because I'll know where they are and challenge them on the street, which always results in very interesting results. They don't like it. The day I received a message on YouTube that says, "I wonder what a sword would look like on your neck."
No way.
Yeah, I mean, I literally just got it today. I was talking to a friend and I was like, "Hey, look what just popped up." And yeah,
gosh,
like. There you
go.
Wait. Well, no, it's a little blurry.
Oh man, there it is. Wait. What would a sword? What would a sword to mark
racer's neck? They're using part of my real name.
Man,
that's the video.
These guys don't like you, man. Sheesh.
No. I told him, hey, put away your sword. He who lives by the sword dies by the sword. Guess who said that?
Okay, so we're gonna get into all that, but first, could you please just? And I want to say this at the onset, guys, and you guys already know I am. I have received my formal education at a public high school, so I am a C student at best. So if you can, man, if you could just tell us what is a Christian apologist?
Sure, yeah. There's the New Testament, which is the latter half of the Bible, 27 books. And one of those parts of the New Testament is a little letter that Peter wrote, the Apostle Peter, called 1 Peter. And in chapter 3, verse 15 of that book, he says, always be prepared to give a defense, or sometimes it's translated as a reason, for the hope that is inside you, but do so with gentleness and respect. So always be ready to do this. And the thing is to give this defense. Well, if you look at the underlying Greek text in that letter, it says give an apologia. And from that root word comes the discipline of apologetics. So apologia means like a reasoned defense, an explanation. And so Peter's saying Christians should be able to do that, specifically focusing on the person of Jesus and the resurrection and his return. That's really the hope that lies inside us, the hope of the truth of the gospel, ultimately. Mm-hmm. There's a lot that goes into that, though. And so that's where apologetics comes from. So there's actually, apologists could actually be for anything. Let's say that you're a fan of Shakespeare. Mm-hmm. And you defend him against any other literary, works, and you might be a Shakespearean apologist. Basically, it's not usually the context it's used in, but it can actually apply to that. Apologetics usually, though, focuses on the Christian ministry of studying to be able to defend the Christian faith.
Mhm.
And sometimes it's positive evidence. We know Jesus rose from the dead because, and then
Mhm.
sometimes it's polemics or negative or defensive, or I'm sorry, not defensive, but more offensive, where it's not only is Christianity true, but this religion is false because of this. It's false because this guy was a false prophet, and here's this false prophecy.
Gotcha.
So there's different elements to it. And actually, you can see them all in the Bible. Isaiah makes fun of the other gods of his day. He says, those gods are cut out of wood, and then you bow down after you made it. And Elijah does the same thing. Paul does similar things. Sometimes they do it more crass. Sometimes it's more subtle. There's different ways. And so that's now in the 21st century. A Christian apologist is someone who explains, clarifies, defends the Christian faith.
Okay. So could you be easily construed as like a provocateur?
I could, not every apologist.
Okay, gotcha.
Most apologists are have way more class than I do. So I don't mind doing juvenile or petty, as long as it's as long as it doesn't cross the line into like sheer ad hominem or something that's ungodly. Like I say part of what I'm saying partially in jest. But there's certain things that I'm willing to do that you would not catch, William Lane Craig, you'd not catch him dead doing, and so perhaps I would, but that's the ultimate goal, honestly, is the gospel. The ultimate goal is to point people to Christ. Right. But I do believe sometimes that might take some different methods. Again, not crossing lines of what's godly and ungodly, and no one's perfect at that. But it's not a transgression for the sake thereof. It's trying to shake people up. When I say transgression, I mean maybe offending something or saying it in a way that wakes them up. And I think people have different lanes and stuff like that. But I really do focus on street stuff. Urban stuff and social media stuff, and those things together kind of make it a unique context that is not for every environment. I recognize that, and so if people don't want to be associated with me, I understand that. I don't judge them. I get it. It's okay, but they got to let us in our spaces breathe. We need to be accountable too. But the streets and internet and all those different types of it's a different world than sitting down, drinking tea, talking to a fellow professor. That's not my world,
Okay.
I could do that. I would do that. I mean, I have some postgraduate studies, but I prefer to kind of roll around in the gutter instead.
Well, I think that's a perfect segue to my next question. And that is, of course, the the Hebrew Israelites. I watched a live. It seemed like it was one of these lives where you're going back and forth with a particular sect. Now, I don't know all of the affiliations, or I don't know. Right. I know there's a bunch of different different sects of the Hebrew Israelitism.
Yeah, there's all kinds of different ways to be a heretic. Yeah.
Oh God. He said it, not me. Okay, but I saw you going back and forth with this guy. It kind of seemed like I got the impression that these guys were aware of you, and that this is something that you do on a regular, and either they pass the word or to be on the lookout. But these guys are fully aware of who you are. So if you could just tell us what is the issue that these groups have against you? Like, what is it?
Well, again, so I alternate between, tongue-in-cheek and seriousness as well. Right. So let me be serious. The real issue is these guys have had free reign where they can say whatever they want without anyone checking their ideas out.
Oh, yeah.
And now that's no longer the case, and they don't like it at all. They have very hostile reactions to actually being checked up on. They do not like it. And so they can say it's a bunch of other stuff, but ultimately they do not like being held accountable for the stuff they say and do. And I'm not saying they're being held accountable really even as much as they should. There's only a small amount of us who do this kind of thing. But within that framework, they don't like it. And the reactions are all just yesterday, one of these guys, and this is not even a street guy. This is a guy who's a pastor, he says, and has a church. He's like a Christian Hebrew Israelite type, because there's a lot of these mix and match nowadays.
Okay.
Where you wear khakis and a button shirt. You know what I mean? He's not out there on the street or something like that. Just yesterday, he went on his channel and said, which is called We Woke Now, and he said that me challenging one of his claims could be considered akin to a hate crime.
No!
And he went on and explained what he meant, and he literally brought up a statute and read the statute and said that all Hebrew Israelites need to become familiar with the statute, because a lot of what the apologists and especially vocab are doing could border on violating this hate crime statute. And he was dead serious. And the way I know he's dead serious is because I did a video where I went to Virginia, where his church was at, and I knew no one was there, so I wasn't bothering anybody. But I did film a video in the parking lot with their church behind me, and in the video, I just challenged some of their claims. It was somewhat of a kind of almost like a documentary style with a little bit of spice in it.
Yeah,
and he didn't like that at all. Even though I didn't really have anything to do in the sense of I wasn't bum rushing him or nothing like that in their service, nothing like. And he said that action was akin to a modern day cross burning.
Oh my God, heresy!
And he actually put that on Facebook and on a story. You know what I mean? This wasn't like a insane. He literally, and he took it down later. And then a few days later, this is a moderate guy now. This is not a radical out on the street corner. A few days later, quoted one of the imprecatory psalms about people's deaths and said he could think of a select few of who he'd wish this upon.
But of course
it was in the context of our back and forth. Clearly he's saying he wants God to kill me, and he was saying basically let it happen
exactly
soon.
I mean, come on, man.
So my point by saying all that is, and you know what our dispute was about? Our dispute is, does Hebrew appear on the side of a church pew in Savannah, Georgia? That's what the dispute. He claims there's Hebrew there. I'm saying it's not Hebrew. And it's more detailed than that, but that's the nature of the debate, because he thinks Hebrew on the pew would be evidence that he's a Hebrew Israelite, and I'm showing that it's not. That
should be easily verifiable, though, right?
It should be, but these guys keep on saying it's Hebrew without showing us which pew is Hebrew and which letters are Hebrew and which scholars agree with the assessment and all that. It got so bad they invented a scholar. They made up a guy named Richard Katz, and then we found out that he was using the same IP as the pastor, the pastor's cousin specifically. My point is, they invented a guy named Richard Katz. You can find him online now. If you put Richard Katz, K-A-T-Z, and then look up stuff on YouTube, you'll find this. You won't find the guy, but you'll find us talking about him because they invented him out of whole cloth. So this is what I'm saying. So the real thing is why they don't like it. And they'll say, because, he does this or that. But you got to understand, these guys have not been nice to Christians. They've been talking about how ignorant Christian church is. They've been saying it's full of lies. They've been showing up at churches while they're in service. They've been making nonstop videos about Pastor Pork Chop and Pass the Plate and all this kind of stuff. It's a nonstop litany of attacks. Yeah,
and I don't, like you said, they haven't been challenged. I mean, I can see that.
So that's the real thing. Why they don't like it. They'll come up with all kinds of other reasons, but they don't like that. But, eventually, if you keep on saying stuff, people might actually look into it and find out 90% of what he's saying is a lie or inaccurate,
So great point. So what in your view, what is the Hebrew Israelites worldview? What is their philosophy? Like, what are their core doctrine?
People in our group are the real Israelites. Modern day Jews are fakes. And our group has special privileges granted us by the divine because of our bloodline. That's the essence of it.
Okay. And when you say people in our group, I want to kind of unpack that. How do you qualify to be part of this group?
So that's the trick. Every Hebrew Israelite defines who's in and who's out somewhat differently. All of them say Black Americans are in.
Even me, and I don't know it.
You would be a Jake. A Jake is an unwoke Hebrew Israelite, basically. As in Jacob, prior to his name.
Wait, are you serious?
Yeah, they would call you a Jake.
Oh, wow. Well, I didn't know that. Guys, I did not know that. I'm a Jake. Yeah. Okay. So
Jake is an unaware Israelite. So
it's kind of arbitrary in that respect then, as far as who can Okay.
They say
okay.
you got to fulfill the curses of Deuteronomy 28. So if you read Deuteronomy 28, it's punishments that God will give Israel if they disobey. And they say, okay, what people group experience these curses? And they'll say, so there's Hebrew Israelite, Danyahu Yasharal. They always will come on in every interview I do and say that's not true and never specify.
I was just going to ask him, like, if you could clarify what you're referring to. Is it Donahue? How do you say it?
Danyahu. He's got. By the way, he's got some strong beard game. I'm not going to fault him on that beard right there. But check this out. The way it works like this. The way it works is Hebrew Israelites almost always have Black Americans in their view of who's an Israelite, with rare exceptions. Now, then it gets dicier. If they have something called the 12 tribes chart, then they include Latinos and Native Americans.
Wow. And
exclude Africans on the continent.
Okay, on the entire continent?
No, but most. For example, they'll say, well, Freetown in Sierra Leone may have some of our people. And the reason is because Freetown was a place where sometimes freed slaves would go and live. That's why it's actually called Freetown. So they'll go to Freetown to say these might be Israelites in Freetown. Or Liberia, because Liberia had some folks who came out of slavery and went back. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So there could be some. But now that's the guys with the chart who include Latinos and Native Americans, by the way, who have totally different paternal haplogroups. So you've got all these people who have clearly different ancestors on their father's side, according to their genetics. That's what a paternal haplogroup is. And yet they're all from Jacob, because that's what they think, 12 tribes. Now, the other Hebrew Israelites, like I bet the guy who just commented probably does not hold to the 12 tribes chart. I could tell by his name and what he said. He probably doesn't hold to the 12 tribes chart. He would also most likely include a number of people on the continent, specifically the Igbo. I bet it'd be interesting to ask him, do you think Igbo are Israelites? To the guy who just commented, please tell us, Igbo, yes, Igbo, no. My guess is he's probably going to say yes. And this is from a very limited, I mean, I'm not even looking at whatever he's saying. So it depends on who it is, right? But it starts with Black Americans. And that's where Hebrew Israelism started. It started in 1890. Two guys got a vision.
1890? Wow.
1890s, actually. With the early.
What inspired the burgeoning of the Hebrew Israelites? How did this transpire to where it is today?
The first one we know of, Reverend William Christian, he's usually not credited as the first Hebrew Israelite, but his book is before anybody else's. So the research I've done is not exactly what you'll see on Wikipedia. Wikipedia, it has a decent entry on Hebrew Israelism, but it's not in depth. But Reverend William Christian is the first guy. Crowdy was next, and both of them said they had visions.
Gotcha.
And then they said they did the research in the Bible to confirm it, but they said they had visions. And you could read Crowdy's account about it. Christian doesn't go into detail, but both of their books are up on a website that I run it's really in a beta form right now, but it's HebrewIsraeliteInfo.com. And the only section that's live right now is the archive section. And then the archive section, you can download these old, because they're past, they're copyright free now. They're past their, anyways, I'm allowed to have them on the website. Oh, look. So this guy is a one-wester. T. Bohr saying Hamites are not Israelites. He's a one-wester. Let me tell you why. A one-wester is a certain kind of Hebrew Israelite, usually the most radical, militant, and to be honest, the least informed, frankly.
Okay, so like a grunt.
Yeah, but they've got smart guys in their ranks, don't get me wrong. It's just they buy into the most amount of lies out of all of them.
Wow.
So what he's saying there is actually this. He's saying folks who experience a transatlantic slave trade are actually Israelites because they experience the curses of Deuteronomy 28, specifically verse 68. Therefore, they are not actually Africans or Hamites. They are actually Israelites or Semites or Shemites. So he himself would think he is a Semite or Shemite. But the people who sold him into slavery are actually not his brothers. And that's part of the reason they sold him into slavery, because they were Hamites on the African continent. For a while, they happened to live together because of the expulsions out of Israel. So they lived together, but had a different soul or vibe, but they were not actually kindred. And over time, the Israelites didn't realize who they were anymore and thought that they actually were Hamites, but the Hamites knew and so sold them into slavery, and they end up in America. And now we're rediscovering our identity, and evil people like Vocab Malone are trying to stop the awakening.
Wow, man, you certainly know your stuff here. So One West. So you said they're called One West. That's what this guy is here.
One West. Okay, think about Christianity for a second here. Big old religion, right? Christianity.
Yeah.
Here we go. There's no denomination called Christianity, but hopefully everyone under the banner is a Christian. Okay. Now there's different streams of theology: Pentecostalism, Reformed, Baptist, but there's not a denomination called Pentecostal per se or Reformed per se. Those are like ideas or theologies. Then underneath those headings are denominations underneath those ideas: Reformed, Presbyterian Church of America, Reformed, the OPC. Okay, I'm giving examples of Reformed denominations. Now let's go over to Baptist, Southern Baptist, American Baptist, Progressive Baptist. See what I'm saying? Now we'll go over to Pentecostals, Assemblies of God, Church of God in Christ. You see what I'm saying? So One West is a big banner, but there's no group called One West. It's an ideology that has many different camps underneath.
So it's monolithic.
It's not, well, even One Westism is not monolithic, but One West is a descriptor of an ideology that came out of One West 125th Street in Harlem, New York in 1969.
Gotcha.
One West is an ideology, and there's different camps roughly akin to a denomination that adhere to One Westism, even if they don't even know what the term is. But if you notice, the book is subtitled Beliefs of One West Hebrew Israelism. So I focus on the One Westers in this book, but I do talk to other groups besides One Westers.
Wow. Okay. So help me understand. So what I know is that the 12 tribes of Israel, they were scattered across the four corners of the earth, right?
Right.
And some migrated to the Caucasus Mountains, others migrated throughout. I know that they pretty much scattered through all different continents, and they in turn lost their identity. Correct. I know that during this Assyrian Empire capture, that I believe it was Cyrus that allowed them to retain their customs, and it wasn't until the Babylonian captivity that they were pretty much scattered to the point where they forgot who they are. So it basically, with all this information that's out there, how are the Hebrew Israelites able to ascertain who they are, and I don't know, how are they able to track this information and to believe it as much as they do?
Right. Well, if I was going to recount the diaspora, I might do it. Well, I would. I'm just, I would do it. I would use some different terms and stuff like that. Did I freeze up? Can you hear me? Okay. I would do it a little bit different than what you just said there, but I don't want to get bogged down in the details of the diaspora. But let's just answer your question, which your question was, how do these guys come to the conclusion they're Israelites?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, the short version that they don't like is they watch a bunch of YouTube videos. Now they're going to be upset about that, but we've seen time and time again, this is conversion via algorithm.
Conversion via algorithm.
Yeah, conversion via algorithm. Now, here's the way the people who promote this, here's what they do. They say, look, if you read the Bible, it's all about Israel. By the way, it's not. It's all about God. Israel wasn't even in existence until God called Abraham out, right? But nonetheless, this is what they say. It's all about Israel. So it's very important. And if you look at the people that call themselves that people today, they clearly don't match the characteristics, because it says there'll be peace in the land. They live in the land. There's no peace. So it can't be them. And besides, they're not the right color. They don't look right for the part. So we have to figure out who it is then. Right. That's what they'll say. So they'll say, well, how can we figure out who it is? Well, we need to go to the scripture, and they'll go to Deuteronomy 28. That's not the only place they go. Okay. They'll say they have all kinds of places, but a lot of times when they start out, that is the key place they go, because what they say is, look, in Deuteronomy 28, God is prophesying. Now, let me tell you what's really going on in Deuteronomy 28. In Deuteronomy 28, God through Moses is saying, hey, Israel, you agreed to this contract or covenant.
Covenant.
If
Yep.
you do what you're supposed to do, here's the ways I'm going to bless you. If you don't do what you're supposed to do, here's the way I'm going to discipline you. Now, if you read the curses, pretty much all of them happen inside the pages of the Old Testament itself. For example, you're going to plant, but then someone else is going to reap the harvest. You can see that in the book of Judges. The Midianites would come every season during harvest time. That's why Gideon was threshing. He was hiding while he was threshing when the angel said, hey, man of valor. And he's like, who are you talking to? Right. So that's just one example. It even predicts cannibalism. Well, that happened. There's the case in Kings or Chronicles where the lady says, hey, we're starving here. Today, let's eat your son, and tomorrow we'll eat my son. So then they eat the lady's son, and then the next day the lady hides her son.
Oh my goodness! This is in
the Bible.
Chronicles.
Yeah, it's Kings or Chronicles. Look it up. It's these are examples of curses.
Gotcha.
This is not like the Bible's like, this is good. It's bad because what happens is Israel disobeys, and God sends foreign invaders to destroy them or to harass them, sometimes like in the cases of Judges, or destroy them in the case of Assyria with the northern part of the country there. So what happens is when you have siege warfare, you're holed up, you don't have any logistics, you don't have transport, you don't have anything coming in or out of the city, you run out of food. So people start eating each other, for example. Well, that's predicted in the Bible and happens in the Bible. You go on and on down the list, you see it. Predictions of rape, predictions of everything. It's awful. Well, it happens to the Israelites. Well, the Hebrew Israelites say that happened then, but it also happened to us during the transatlantic slave trade.
Oh.
So we're the real Israelites.
Okay. Wow. And I've noticed that they do a lot of cherry picking to kind of transpose what actually has already taken place and was already historically a historical account in the Bible, and they'll transpose it to what has happened within the last century. So hold up 1 second. So basically, help me understand, but does the Hebrew Israelite doctrine, does it, in your view, align with the Bible? Is their core doctrine in alignment with the Bible?
What's interesting, their core doctrine is not even in the Bible, which is, our identity was lost, so we got to rediscover it. So they're going to the transatlantic slave trade to prove they're an Israelite. That's not even the scripture. So the whole thing itself is based upon extra biblical theories, really.
Wow.
But most Hebrew Israelites' core doctrine is anti-gospel. Now let me share what I mean by that, which makes it anti-Bible.
Gotcha.
There's a few things what I mean by that. The one Westers, as I mentioned before, are the most glaring example. They teach only Israel can even inherit the kingdom. So the other nations, that's Asians, Arabs, East Indians, Hamites, as we just discussed before, Africans, and some other folks, especially Europeans, whom they call Edomites, they're not going to be able to inherit the kingdom's benefits. They're going to actually be servants to the Israelites and even actually slaves in some cases. So that's a gospel that's literally based upon what ethnic group you're supposed to be part of. Now they'll say it's from the Bible, right? They'll point to certain things and whatnot. But that's something that violates, for example, Matthew 28, which Jesus says, go into all the world, make disciples of all nations. Jesus literally says that at the end of Matthew. That's the Great Commission. So the very last marching orders that Jesus gives to the church, they're not for, because they turn that into, well, just go preach the gospel to Israelites all over. Then you read the book of Acts and you see the Ethiopian eunuch, who's not an Israelite, being baptized after he's saved, after reading Isaiah by Philip.
Yep.
You see Cornelius, the Roman centurion in Acts chapter 10, be saved. He's of the Italian band. You see the Philippian jailer. You go on and on. You see Paul offering the gospel to Agrippa at the end of the book. You see them rolling around with Luke, who most certainly was a Gentile. You see them rolling around with Timothy, whose father was a Greek, not an Israelite. So he'd be mixed on the wrong side, according to their breakdown. You see Paul rocking with Titus, not an Israelite, not of the circumcision. You see all this and you say, okay, clearly this is a universal mission, a universal gospel. It's for all people everywhere, which is what Jesus said in John 12. If I be lifted up, I will draw all men unto me. It can't literally mean all men because not everyone's saved. And the Bible says in 1 Corinthians that the cross is a stumbling block. So what does it mean? Jesus says in John 12 that I'll draw all men into me. Well, if you read the passage right before he said that, some Greeks had come to visit him. So he's clearly saying all kinds of people, all kinds of men, as it were, unto me. And so when you look at that, you see that this is played out in the book of Acts, Jew and Gentile alike. And then Paul's letters include that. That's why he withstands Peter to his face in Galatians 2, because Peter stopped eating with the Gentile Christians when some of his Jewish friends came. And Paul said, your conduct is out of line with the gospel. Peter was having a little bigotry going on. Then that's in Galatians 2. Then you go to Galatians chapter 3. And Paul says in verse 7 and verse 29 that if you're of Christ, you are Abraham's seed. So it's not even a physical lineage thing that matters. And then in Romans, Paul says that not all who are of Israel are of Israel. Right. And the Bible also says in multiple places, those whom he's called of Jew and Gentile alike. So this is a church comprised of Jew and Gentile. Ephesians 2 says he's torn down the wall of hostility, making out of the two one new man. Talking about Jew and Gentile. Then you go to Revelation 7, it says every nation, tribe, and tongue will be worshipped in the land. So the Hebrew Israelites who do this Israel only, and they think they're in the club and everyone's not. They're anti-gospel.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like, man. So forgive my ignorance, but is it fair to say that a lot of these guys are pretty much using the gospel, the word of God to sort of justify, I don't know, racism on some level?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. It's it's to justify bigotry, and to make themselves at the top of a food chain. So, there's other guys who say, no. You white guys and you Asians, you can be and you just got to know your place. So you're like a second class citizen, basically. Yeah, you can't teach other Israelites, and most of these schemas like GOCC, and you just got to know your position. But you can be included in, just, understand who you are. Remember, this is all based upon the assumption that they're Israelites in the first place, which is not historically, scientifically, linguistic verified in any way. So it's all based upon a misunderstanding and a falsehood in the first place. But that's the way they proceed, as if it's true. And then when they tell people about it, people buy into this because it answers the question, who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? In a satisfactory way, even if it's not true. And the reason is because people are trying to find their identity outside of Christ, who they are supposed to be in Christ. And wait, what was that one? Someone said I was slandering. What was that?
There it is.
Vocab, you are slandering a lot of Hebrew Israelites with these lies. Okay, so my guess is just Reese, by saying I'm slandering a lot of Hebrew Israelites, is most likely, but I can see by the verse, most likely saying, hey, Vocab is talking about these groups that exclude other nations, but a lot of Hebrew Israelites allow in other nations. I think that's what probably this person means. Now, let me say something. Audience, did I or did I not say the ones I'm talking about now are the one Westers only?
Yeah.
When I just ran down that thing. Yeah. Now, the Hebrew Israelites who allow other nations in, they still have an ethnic hierarchy. Like, for example, some of them don't allow intermarriage between Israelites and non-Israelites. Some do, some don't. Most of them, except for rare exceptions, don't allow anyone who's not of an Israelite origin to teach Israelites. So it's literally, there's a racial caste system there. And so there's a lot of problem even within the groups who allow others in. And look, just because you allow other people in doesn't mean that you're still adhering to Christian doctrine, because you're still creating tiers. Here's a higher tier, here's a lower tier within the body of Christ. But see, See, Galatians 3:28 is important. It does say there's neither Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, male nor female. They'll say, oh, so there's no male or female? That's not what the verse is saying. We're not claiming that. What does it mean when it says there's neither Jew nor Greek? It's saying within the body of Christ, there's an equality. There's not some kind of hierarchy like there is on a human scale. There's equality at the foot of the cross. Basically, it's not saying those distinctions are done away with. You're still Jew, you're still Greek, you're still slave, you're still free, if that's the case, or less mutable categories, male, female. That is who you are, right? But at the same time, there's equality at the foot of the cross. Well, a lot of these groups don't really have equality, and a lot of them don't even really focus on the cross very much. So a lot of those people commenting, a lot of them, I bet you, overemphasize Old Testament works of the law. And that's another way that they tarnish the gospel, because the gospel says you're satisfied. Christ has satisfied the wrath of God. So keeping Old Testament law is vain. There's no temple in Jerusalem. You can't really do it anyway. And I can tell you right now, there's the Feast of Tabernacles going on. Yeah. Unless they're going to Jerusalem to celebrate it, these groups are not actually keeping it, because the Feast of Tabernacles is a pilgrimage feast. Where you would need to go there and be in Jerusalem and set up the tent. And I bet you hardly any of these guys sleep outside in a tent for 8 days like you're supposed to.
Yeah, that's a point of contention that I've had with a friend of mine. He was very adamant that we are still to abide by the laws, the statutes, the ordinances. When I tried to direct him to what Colossians said, I can't remember the verse, but pretty much all the statutes and the ordinances were done away with. Was I misunderstanding that, or help clarify that, if you don't mind, as far as those who are still holding steadfast to sort of the old covenant?
Yeah, Colossians is good. It has some interesting stuff. Let me grab one. See if I can. Here we go. Colossians 2:16 is probably what you're quoting. Therefore, let no one pass judgment on you in questions of food and drink, or with regard to a festival, or a new moon, or a Sabbath. These are a shadow of the things to come, but the substance belongs to Christ.
Yes.
I mean, it literally says, hey, these things were a shadow, and now we've got Christ, and he's a substance. And it really says festival. So, like, the way they try to twist this is, oh yeah, that's because like the Christians at the time who didn't do those things were judging those who did. They try to flip it around. But is that what it's saying? Let no one pass judgment on you in any way that you turn. It's in either way, in questions of food and drink, or with regard to a festival. So whichever way you decide on the festival, you can't pass judgment on a fellow Christian in regards to that. Or a new moon, or a Sabbath. Sabbath is the fourth command. And here he's saying, don't let that be something that you judge other Christians on. You can keep the Sabbath or not keep the Sabbath. There's freedom. They don't like that, but the fact is,
they don't like that. They don't like
that. But hold on, leave this comment up. They don't like that, but the fact is that Christ is our Sabbath rest, and he has fulfilled these things. Now, whenever you say this, they say, oh, so you can do whatever you want. No one's saying that, because if you are attached to a holy God, then you care about holiness. If the Holy Spirit's inside you, you're not going to do it. But the fact is, we live in the new covenant, not the old covenant. Now, look. Just Read says there's a website, Black History in the Bible, that has a wealth of information to find out Israelites according to prophecies written in the Bible. The guy who runs Black History in the Bible, his name is Dante Fortson. I've debated Dante Fortson on the 400-year prophecy he made. Dante Fortson said that the Black Americans' captivity was going to come to an end in 2019, because from 1619 to 2019, according to Mr. Fortson, marks a 400-year period prophesied in the book of Genesis. Okay. They think that they're the Israelites. They think the prophecy in Genesis actually relates to them. And here's the thing. Nothing really happened in 2019, indicating an end of a captivity. And so what he had to do is kind of change what he was saying, and he turned it into, well, at that 400 years, these wicked nations are going to get judged. And so then he will say things like, look, COVID happened, and these murdering hornets, these hornets that were coming out, these are signs of that. And we're like, you were saying captivity's coming to an end, whatever that meant. No, you're misrepresenting me. You're lying. This is a hate crime. So the guy who runs this website, if you go on change.org, literally has a petition against me to have the NAACP declare that I lead a hate group. If you don't believe me, right now, go on change.org, look up Vocab Malone, and look up all, and you'll find he literally has a petition to try to get the NAACP to declare that I lead a hate group. The Black History in the Bible website and its owner are not a good source of information. He made a false prophecy. He needs to be called into account that the 400-year prophecy. If you want to hear a debate on it, go to Brother Brian's channel. We debated on it, and he did not do a good job. He literally, he made no defense of his writings that I repeated to him verbatim. He all he did was evade and tried to attack. He made no defense of his false 400-year prophecy. And he's recently come out and said, well, maybe it's the 430-year number, so we won't know until another 20-some years. So it's like, bro, this is not a valid website, and I have evidence that he's plagiarized material there. And the WIDA thing that he promotes on that website, saying, you know, there's a play that's been disproved by Nefertiti and by David Richardson. Yeah, this is the common thing, what Craig Wood is saying. This is what Sabbatarians say. It says a Sabbath, not the Sabbath. That's a common thing they say. So let's just say you're right about that. Let's just say, first of all, then interpret to me what the passage would mean. But what if it says a Sabbath? I want you to tell me what the passage means, so how we're getting Colossians 2:16 wrong, Craig. And Craig, what about the rest of the passage? Because it says a festival.
Right.
What are you going to do with that one? They think they have something there, and I know they've heard it repeated. No offense to Craig, my bet would be that, you know, he's probably never taken a Greek class, and I'm not throwing that around. I'm just saying that a lot of times people, they repeat these arguments and they think they've got something, like the translators are wrong and their guy on YouTube is right. But let's just say you're right on that. First of all, interpret it what it means, then according to your schema, please tell us. Secondly, what do you do with the fact that it still says a festival?
Yep.
And you could even consider the Sabbath a festival in a way, but the festival, I mean, my goodness.
Christ became our rest, essentially.
Yes.
Right.
I mean, and that's what that's actually, let me give you a verse for that real quick. I think it's in Hebrews. Now, again, there's Christian freedom within this, okay? There is Christian freedom in this. But we got to remember that, you know, Jesus said, it is finished, right? That is what he said. He said, it is finished in John 19:30. And
because he was fulfilling the law, wasn't he?
Yeah.
Christ came to fulfill the law, not change a jot or an iota of the law.
Yeah, he's not destroying it, he's fulfilling it. But the question is, what does fulfill mean? You know, what does it mean? I think that's important to understand. But look at Hebrews 4, right? Therefore, while the promise of entering his rest still stands. So whose rest are we entering? Jesus's, right?
Yeah.
This is where our rest is found now. Let us fear, lest any of you should seem to have failed to reach it. and there's more on that there, but it's very fascinating. Check this out. Because what happens is essentially entering rest gets equated with salvation, not keeping some certain day. For good news came to us just as to them, but the message they heard did not benefit them because they were not united by faith with those who listened. So it's saying they heard the law, but it didn't matter because hearing it and even an outward observance is not what gives you righteousness.
Exactly.
For we who have believed enter that rest. So how do you enter the rest of God now? By believing. They don't like that, but that's what it says. Right. As he has said, as I swore in my wrath, they shall not enter my rest. Circumcision
of the heart, correct?
Yeah. And, you know, Paul, and by the way, everyone should read all of Hebrews 4 in regards to the Sabbath rest, because it's a very fascinating passage. But you check this out. Paul actually in the KJV says, circumcision availeth nothing. And in Philippians 3, Paul speaks about his circumcision on the 8th day, and then says, I count it as scubalon, which is like dung or rubbish. He's saying that's not what's relevant. To what? To the knowledge of Christ, to knowing him. So see, that's the emphasis. These guys want to live under the old covenant. Most of these people commenting, I bet if you asked them, are we in the old covenant or the new covenant? My guess is none of them will give you a straightforward answer, but they'll ask a question indicating to let you know they think we're still stuck in the old covenant. Despite the fact that Jesus said, this is the blood of the new covenant shed for you.
Right.
You know, I mean, we are in the new. Now, is the new covenant completed? No, not until the Lord comes back. But that's the reality, right?
Jessica Bear asks, Vocab, what is your position on Jesus? Do you think he was a prophet like the Orthodox Jew and not relevant, or that he was God manifest in flesh? Respectfully.
Well, I am a Trinitarian. So Jesus is the Logos, and he's the Son of God. And he's not a created being, and he's always existed. And for lack of a better word, he's a member. I don't like the word part because it implies some kind of physical division, but I can say a member of the triune Godhead. And so Jesus is everything. Jesus is everything. There's a number of places to go for this. Colossians 1 is very, very powerful to understand who Jesus really is. Because what was going on at the church of Colossae, it seems like they were getting caught up in some weird stuff. And that's why that passage was in 2. But look at what happens where Paul just says we need to focus on the supremacy of Christ. Look at Colossians 1. He is the image of the invisible God. So Jesus is the image of the invisible God. Now, how can he be Yahweh embodied, or how can he be Yahweh visible if he himself is not God? I don't see how you interpret this, but we're not done yet. He is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. Now, sometimes people will leap on this and be like, oh, look, firstborn, he's created. Well, first of all, if you're taking firstborn literal, then Jesus was born, because it doesn't say first created or first generated. And there are terms for that in Greek. It says firstborn. Did he have a mother? Did he come out of a womb? So it doesn't mean that. But what is firstborn in Hebraic thought? We got to go Hebraic in our thinking here. It's the favored one. David's called the firstborn, even though he's technically not. Remember Jesse, the last little kid, when he brought them all out? Right. Firstborn indicates the favored position. Wow. Or remember, in the case of Israel, God actually in the Old Testament referred to Israel as his firstborn, but it's not his firstborn. Right. There's other nations before Israel. Firstborn means the preeminence.
So that's a Hebraism.
Wow. Yeah, it is Hebraism. And here's what people forget. They forget to connect it to 18. So I'm going to jump ahead just for a second. Okay. He is the head of the body of the church. He's the beginning, the firstborn from the dead. So what's that mean? Jesus firstborn from the dead. So however Paul's using it shouldn't be inconsistent between these two little lines unless you got a really good reason for it. Right. It says he's the firstborn from the dead. What's that mean? It's preeminent among those who be resurrected because he's the first fruits of the new resurrection. That's what firstborn from the dead is. He's not the first person to die. So whatever firstborn of all creation is tying in to firstborn of the dead. It means preeminent among, which is what the passage is about. Now watch this. For by him, that's by Jesus, all things were created. Jehovah's Witnesses don't like this so much, they literally insert in brackets the word other. For by him, all other things were created. Because if he created all things, guess what, people? He himself is not created. That's why they put the word other in there. But you go into the Greek New Testament of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and the word other in Greek is not there. They just insert it into English. Hebrew Israelites basically do this without doing it because they don't have a New World Translation. But they basically say, well, yeah, the other things. Now, remember, this is Hebrew Israelites who accept the New Testament. Not all Hebrew Israelites even accept the New Testament, and not all of them even accept Paul, but those who do play games with the text. For by him all things were created in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things. If he's before all things, who's before all things? God and God alone. In the beginning, God. How's he before all things? Especially if he himself is created. So he can't be created here. And in him, all things hold together. So the only reason you could say this is because Jesus is to be understood and identified as God. You can't speak of a mere man in these terms. You can't speak of an angel in these terms. And he is the head of the body of the church. He's the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in everything he might be preeminent. For in him, all the fullness of God was pleased to dwell. All. So it's not just the Spirit of God resting upon him. Everything that God is, he is. And through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether on earth or in heaven, making peace by the blood of his cross. So that's just one passage. But there's a number.
You know what I was just thinking about as you were saying that. I was just one verse just kept ringing in my head. In the beginning, there was the Word, the Logos.
Yeah, John 1. Yeah,
and the Word was God. So is that so? Christ was there in the beginning, since the beginning.
Yeah, and I like to do a few things with John 1:1 here. Number one is John is Hebrew, he is clearly imitating to purposeful effect Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was with Theos, and the Logos was Theos. So if you stopped it and just said in the beginning was a Word and the Word was with God, you would think, oh, so the Word and God, two separate beings or entities in the beginning. But then he goes on and messes with you and says, and the Word was God. So in one way, this word is not to be identified directly with God. Here is understood. This is understood to be God the Father, because we're talking about Logos as Son, and you can see that when you read the entire passage. But yet this word is God. Not that he's the Father, but he's Yahweh, Theos. So you see Jesus is a distinct person, yet he's with God since the beginning. That only makes sense if you have a triune nature of God, because the Spirit, of course, is identified as God as well. And that's what early Christians recognized. They saw the Son is called God. The Father is obviously called God. And there's this Spirit that's Jesus promised to send, and he's identified as God. But the Bible says there's only one God. So what do? We have something very unique here. We have a being who is only one, but yet three persons in one being, unlike anything else in creation. So when someone says, how do I view Jesus? A very high view of Jesus, where he is literally Yahweh embodied, always existed. And, the other thing I like to do with John 1, like I mentioned, I like to tie it in with Genesis 1, and this is important, is also go to John 8, where Jesus says, before Abraham was, I am. Before Abraham was, ego eimi. So he's saying I pre-existed Abraham, and it's not also accidental that he's using I am in Greek. In the Septuagint, that's what God would say, ego eimi, I am. So it's like saying I pre-existed Abraham, which no mere man could do, by the way. And he's also saying that I am. It's like, what? And he does stuff like that a few times. I'll say ego eimi. It's like, oh, what? So Jesus is letting you know who he is. And
so
if we take him for anything different,
let me ask you. So Melchizedek,
yeah,
I forgot what it says in the Greek.
That's in Hebrews, yeah.
In Hebrew, excuse me. The king of the Zadok, the elect, was that Christ?
So you can and my view of that is that Christians can have legitimate disagreements. This is not something that should determine our orthodoxy or our salvation. Before I answer,
right, I understand.
I believe Melchizedek is a real person who is not Christ. I do not think this is an example of a Christophany. I understand the appeal to try to do that, but but the indication is that Melchizedek is a real person, and what's happening is the author of Hebrews is showing you, just like Melchizedek was, there's similarities between him and Christ in a way. What scholars call a type and an antitype. So Melchizedek is a type of Christ, and then the fulfillment of that, the antitype, doesn't mean the opposite. It's a way to say that essentially the fulfillment of, basically the antitype in that case would be Christ. So not actually a Christophany, but like him. For example, he says, that Melchizedek, doesn't have a mother or father. What he's saying is his genealogy is not included in the Bible. Gotcha. Not that he literally came out of nowhere, but Jesus, literally did pre-exist his birth in Bethlehem as the Word prior to him being called Jesus. So that's one thing. And then when you read Genesis, there's no indication that Melchizedek is divine. You might get some indication that this sort of mysterious character that comes out of nowhere is special. And he seems to be the king of peace, king of Salem. It seems my understanding, he's like king of Salem means peace, but he's a king of this area, and Abraham gives him respect, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And another reason why this happens is because of a problem if we don't interpret something spiritually. Some people aren't going to like that, but I think it's true. Let me show you what I mean real quick here. This is going off a little bit, but it does relate to who Jesus is. Check this out. You had to be a Levite in the Old Testament to be a priest.
Absolutely.
If you weren't, you could get killed. That's straight up. If you had to prove it with papers and stuff. Well, now you got Jesus, who is said to be a priest according to the author of Hebrews, who is of the tribe of Judah. But he's not a Levite.
Well, his what is it? I think Elizabeth, Mary's cousin, had some Levitical Didn't she have some Levitical relation?
Maybe because of her husband's status is possible. So some people say that may be a case, but we don't. To me, it always seems speculative. And the author of Hebrews doesn't go that way. He goes a different way with it. And here's what he does. He says, look, yes, Jesus is not a Levite. He's from Judah, but he's still a priest like Melchizedek was a priest. So let me just read it here. This is Hebrews 7:11. Now, if perfection had been attainable through the Levitical priesthood. So the author here is saying perfection was not attainable under the old covenant. Levitical priesthood, part and parcel to that, right? But it's saying it's not. If perfection had been attainable through the Levitical priesthood, for under it the people received the law. So he's talking about the whole kit and caboodle right here. What further need would there have been for another priest to arise after the order of Melchizedek, rather than one named after the order of Aaron? So Jesus is not a son of Aaron. He is a son of David. And he's saying order of Melchizedek. He's not saying literally that Jesus was descended from Melchizedek, but he's saying in line like the same kind of person Melchizedek was under that order. Now, it's not clear that Melchizedek actually had some priesthood or order, definitely wasn't operating in Israel. If so, there's no indication, well, the Melchizedekian priest, but this is somewhat using some symbols here, but to prove the point that's still valid. For when there is a change in the priesthood, so the author is saying there's been a change in the priesthood because Jesus is a different kind of priest. There is necessarily a change in the law as well. So Jesus being a priest equals a change in the law. Some people say, well, yeah, the only thing Jesus changed was now we don't have to kill people when they sin or something like that. No, there's other things as well. And look what it says here, a change in the law as well because of the nature of his priesthood. For the one of whom these things are spoken belonged to another tribe from which no one has ever served at the altar. For it is evident that our Lord was descended from Judah, and in connection with that tribe, Moses said nothing about priests. This becomes even more evident when another priest arises in the likeness of Melchizedek. So that element where it says likeness lets me think, I don't think that's Melchizedek because it's a likeness of Melchizedek, who has become a priest not on the basis of a legal requirement concerning bodily descent. Notice again how it's not about bodily descent. Folks get caught up in this, especially Hebrew Israelites, but the author of Hebrews isn't caught up on bodily descent, but by the power of an indestructible life. Basically saying Jesus, because of who he is, God, is greater than the mere requirements of the priesthood. He himself is perfect. Now watch this. For it was witnessed of him, you are a priest forever after the order of Melchizedek, quoting the Old Testament there. For on one hand, a former commandment is set aside because of its weakness and uselessness. People who want to live under the old covenant, praise God for when it was there. If you were alive during that time, I hope we could all have been faithful, but it was not intended to be permanent. Otherwise, verses like this would be heretical, but they're not. For on the one hand, a former commandment is set aside because of its weakness and uselessness, for the law made nothing perfect. But on the other hand, a better hope is introduced through which we draw near to God. Now, both of these are introduced by God, but the thing is, he does things in time over time. So it's not all at once. Old covenant here, it was good, but it's not as good as the new covenant. And it was not without an oath. For those who formerly became priests were made such without an oath. But this one was made a priest with an oath by the one who said to him, Lord has sworn and will not change his mind. You are a priest forever. This makes Jesus the guarantor of a better covenant. Notice that's present tense. Even in the Greek, it refers to something happening now. Jesus is already the guarantor of a better covenant. So we're not living under the old covenant. I mean, it's right here in Hebrews 7:22. The former priests were many in number. Notice how he's saying this is not part of the system now because they were prevented by death from continuing in office, but he holds his priesthood permanently because he continues forever. Consequently, he's able to save to the uttermost those who draw near to God through him, since he always lives to make intercession for them. Notice salvation here is based upon drawing near to Christ, and he's the one who intercedes on the behalf like a priest would do. How did he do that ultimately? Through the cross, and now he continues to do it. Let me end real quick here because this is powerful stuff. For it was
is,
indeed
man.
fitting that we should have such a high priest, holy, innocent, unstained, separated from sinners, and exalted above the heavens. He has no need, like those high priests, to offer sacrifices daily, first for his own sins and then for those of the people, since he did this once for all when he offered up himself. And that's why we don't. I think this verse militates against things like taking mass as if it's a sort of a re-sacrifice. I mean, once for all, he's sacrificed. He's done. He's sitting down. We don't need priests anymore. I mean, Jesus is our high priest. He's sitting down, meaning his work is accomplished. For the law appoints men in their weaknesses as high priests, but the word of the oath, which came later than the law, appoints a son who has been made perfect forever. And yet some of these Israelites, they also run around and they have guys who lead their organizations with names like chief priest and chief high priest. You know, and they don't even do anything a priest would do. But look, we're under the new covenant. It's better. Jesus is our high priest. The law has been altered, but the new covenant's better than the old covenant. So it's okay because that was the whole point of the law, to point to Jesus anyway.
So okay. So I'm gonna heat this up, man, because of time. So I just need yes or no answers. Yeah, just yes or no answers, and we're gonna just gonna go through a few questions. Okay, so here we go. First question. Do you believe human beings today are rejecting God?
Yes, but they always have.
Do you believe in white supremacy?
No, I hate white supremacy.
Are black people oppressed?
Yes, but not as bad as it was if we're talking about American context.
Do you believe our battle is a physical battle or a spiritual battle? I know that's not yes or no, but
ultimately spiritual for the Christian.
Is it possible to know God without reading the Bible?
Yes, but only vague details about him, like Romans 1 says. To really know him, you have to be exposed to Scripture in some way, and ultimately Jesus, to really know him.
Do we have free will?
We have free choice according to our sinful nature, but our wills are trapped in sin. So I would say no. If we mean autonomous free will, only God really has free will because he's the only one who could do whatever he wants.
Okay. Should men have leaders?
There's leaders, but all men should have leaders. Ultimately, it should be Jesus themselves. It depends what you mean by that. You know, like
should another man lead? Or should another man lead another man? Should a man lead another man?
Jesus led the 12. I mean, pastor is supposed to lead a church, so it's a servant leadership model, but there is still leadership, even within a Christian structure. So I would ultimately say yes, we should all be accountable, basically, in some way.
Okay. Do you believe in the rapture?
I do not believe in the rapture, but I do believe Jesus is coming back. So I hold the second coming and the rapture are one event. The rapture is not caught up into heaven, disappear for 7 years. The second coming is Jesus resurrects everyone, comes back to earth. So the way it's presented by dispensationalists, I do not believe in that, but I don't get mad at anyone who does.
All right. This may be a rhetorical question here, but did you vote for Obama?
No, I did not vote for Obama.
Did you vote for Trump?
I'll say that the first time Trump ran, I did not vote for Trump. I voted for the independent out of Utah, and things changed after that. But I don't think I could ever see myself voting for any Democrat.
I wish we had a little time to get into that, man. But I think that pretty much wraps it up, man. Vocab, this has been very, very enlightening, man. I have been reading and studying the Bible for better half of 15, 20 years. And it really makes the world a difference when you're going into the Greek and the Hebrew, transliteration and of everything, and colloquialisms and all that. Because that stuff really kind of brings a more comprehensive look at what you're actually reading. So I think that really certainly helps, man. But you definitely shed some light on a lot of what I didn't know, and I'm going to have to go back and watch this myself again and kind of do some cross-referencing, man. I really appreciate you, man.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, and sorry some of my answers were long-winded there, man. You know, I don't want to do that to you.
No. Hey, look, no, man. Look, you're out there, man. You're fighting a good fight, man. So that's all that matters, man. We're all, like I said, you know what? I should have asked you. I really wanted to get your perspective on Christians today? Like, do you think that Christians now are more lukewarm, more weaker than ever before in recorded history? Like,
So there's a yes and a no to that. When Christianity was more popular, for lack of a better phrase, in America,
mhm,
it created a lot of lukewarm people that would attend church and say they were Christians, but it was almost like part of their civic or civil duty versus really any kind of on fire relationship with Christ. And so
right.
you had a lot of like just kind of a bloated mass. And
Mm,
so one good thing potentially about intensified persecution and Christian ideas and principles not being as kind of the part of the culture anymore, especially here in the West, is that it should sharpen those who remain and should get us in a place where, you know, we're really standing out for the
mm,
Lord. And so, you know, it's just a different challenge at a different time. The
yeah,
challenge, you know, 70 years ago would have been waking up all these people that would say they're Christian just because they're American or something. Well, now
yeah,
we have kind of a different set of challenges with a really hostile culture.
yeah,
And yeah, there's a lot of Christians that are pretty much asleep still and
yeah.
playing games. And honestly, I don't believe, from what I've been able to see, that the future of the church is really in the West. I think that probably the past of the
Hmm.
church. I'm not saying there'll be no more Christians. I'm saying, as far as where God is really moving, from
Yeah.
what it looks like to me, the next Christendom, to use a phrase, is in Southeast Asia, is in Sub-Saharan Africa, and is
Mm,
to also to an extent Latin America.
okay.
That's what I believe. I think the West will be more and more basically just hostile to
Wow.
Christianity. I think that's where what the demographics I see
Yeah,
happening.
yeah, it certainly seems more palpable. This tension that's arising right now, as far as what's happening with Christians. I don't know. Just Reese wants me to ask you this. I don't know. He said, "The real unwoke. Could you ask him about Luke 21:24? I guess we can just close it off with this. If you could just, I don't
Well,
know,
man, I thought we were
expound."
going to talk more about politics.
I know. You know what, man? I'm short on time, man. I'm so sorry. Uh-oh. I don't, if we could get you back, man. I know you gotta probably have a busy schedule, but you know, it looks like my audience is like they're loving this whole this entire interview here. I mean, if we can set up some time, you know, to kind of delve into the politic aspect, I would love that, man.
Yeah, I'd be down to do that. I don't know what they want me to say, but I mean, they will fall by the edge of the sword and be led captive among all nations, and Jerusalem will be trampled underfoot by the Gentiles until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled.
Yeah,
Um,
what is, I
I,
don't know.
I think basically Jesus is predicting what happened to Jerusalem in 70 AD.
Hmm.
You know, when you read Luke 21 verses 20 through 24, which line up with Matthew 24 and Mark 13, you see these stages and the coming of the end being described. You see
Yeah.
Jerusalem's going to be besieged, even depopulated for a while, and handed over to Gentile rule for a certain amount of time. And some people are going to be able to flee. They're going to see God's judgment upon the city. And I believe that's what happened in 70 AD. So you see a lot of suffering and sorrow during that time. And Jesus describes that, and it happened. And so you see this, but then the question is, what else is going on there? There's a lot of debate about what it means, the times of the Gentiles. It clearly does indicate some type of Gentile domination of Jerusalem. But does that have something to do with the period of conversion of the Gentiles mentioned in Romans 11:25? And
Mhm.
Jesus also here doesn't say what would happen to Jerusalem at the end of this period that he talks about. So Hebrew Israelites will sometimes think that they have a clear interpretation of this, but usually I don't follow their certainty here, and it doesn't really prove they're Israelites. But they usually use this passage to try to say this is evidence that the people who live in Jerusalem today are Gentiles. That's where they
Oh,
usually go with that.
okay.
And a few
Okay.
things about that. Gentiles, for the most part, off and on have lived in Jerusalem to some extent for a long time.
Mhm.
And even today, even if you don't have the same views as Hebrew Israelite, you still see Palestinians living together next to Israelites, you know, even today. And the question is really who's in charge of Israel now? You know, that'd be a question that they would want to talk about, because remember, they're trying to find a true bloodline, and so they want to dislodge Jews as people so they can be the people instead.
Right.
But for me as a believer, those are interesting questions, but not as important as who believes Jesus is the Messiah, which is the real issue. And Paul says in Titus 3:9, hey, don't get caught up in foolish controversies like genealogies. And then he says in 1 Timothy 1:1 as well, avoid endless genealogies. But these guys are kind of obsessed with genealogies. And that's my guess is that's where he's trying to take it. So maybe we can talk about that more some other time.
Awesome, man. Appreciate that. Reese, I hope that answers your question. Vocab, tell the folks where they can find you, man. What you got going on?
Sure. I'm on YouTube a lot for now, youtube.com/vocab Malone. I do a live stream show called Street Apologist TV, and I'll interview people, and then I put up videos as well. And, I cover a lot of Hebrew Israelism and urban apologetic issues, but not only. So I got some videos coming up on the channel where I'm debating some atheists, and they're actually pretty friendly debates. Some others where I'm on a panel with David Wood and Hatum and stuff like that, talking about Islam and stuff like that. And, that's all on the channel. I may do too much. Maybe I should just focus on one thing, but I have a lot of interests, and so I cover a lot of things, But you can find the books on Amazon and some other websites if you just type the title. And then I really do hope people get at least one of these. They're good, and I try not to make them too expensive. And I think they will benefit you because I try to make them very user friendly.
All right. Well, there it is, guys. All right, man. Hey, again, man, I appreciate you coming on. Guys, do not forget to like the video, like the YouTube, hit the like button, of course, hit the notification bell, all that good stuff. Go check out my man Vocab. This was great. We appreciate him for coming on. And hey, man, if Lori reach out to you, we can set something up, and we can definitely get into some a range of other topics here. I would love to hear your perspective on. So
I appreciate it. Thanks, Lori, for all your hard work. And it's interesting. You managed to get a decent amount of Hebrew Israelites coming through.
I don't know how they, I thought that perhaps maybe they might have heard. I don't know. Did you promote this or something?
I may or may have not put a community post out. And
there you go. Because I usually don't get them in my audience. So I'm like, where are these guys coming out of the woodwork here? What the heck?
Well, not all, but a lot of these Hebrew Israelites, even though most of them that I've seen don't vote, a lot of them do have some kind of conservative leaning. So, I don't know all your positions and stuff like that. But my guess is you guys may agree on some stuff more than you think. And they probably will like you better than they like me.
Yeah, because it seems like they're too busy trying to put swords to your necks. It sounds like.
Well, the guys in the live chat tonight were nice, so and the gals, I like them, and it's okay. I have thick skin, I had to grow up a certain way that God taught me. You better have thick skin, or you're gonna be crying every day. So I'm all right.
You got it, man. You got it, guys. Again, don't forget to hit the like button, hit this notification bell if you are not subscribed to my channel. What are you doing? Subscribe. Go check out my man Vocab out. And I guess that'll do it, man. You know how we end this. We are speaking truth in reality, and I promise you, we will reinstitute morality. Have a good night, fellas.
And you ain't black.
All right, brother. Good show. Thanks, man.